Hey you guys, so I'm going to take a brief moment and just talk about the pros and cons of going to an HBCU and the pros and cons of going to a PWI. Now, for those of you who don't know, an HBCU is a historically black college or university, and a PWI is a predominantly white institution. Now, I have gone to both. My undergraduate degree was from a HBCU called Norfolk State University, and I got my master's degree online at USC, University of Southern California. Both of my degrees were in communication. In undergrad, I did mass communications and journalism, and in grad school, I did communication management. I loved my experience at both of these institutions, but I just want to talk about my experience. Now, keep in mind, when I first started college, it was 2012. That was about 8 years ago, and a lot has changed socially, economically, politically. So I don't want these experiences that I'm going to share invalidate anybody else's experience, or I don't want the fact that times have changed to invalidate my own experience. I'm just speaking from my own life and my own perspective, and you're free to agree or disagree. So I went to Norfolk State University because it was very close to home. It's an HBCU in my area. I always knew that I wanted to get the HBCU experience because my parents always bragged about Black colleges and their importance in the community. I do have older parents, so going to an HBCU in their generation was really looked at as something that was considered prestigious. It was definitely looked at as something that was honorable and a good choice to make. Now, of course, going to college in general was a good choice to make. But anyway, some of the pros that I'll say that HBCUs have are community, for number one, and just the importance of belonging. So I say that because a lot of HBCUs were founded because Blacks weren't being admitted into PWIs, so we had to create our own institutions of higher learning. And most of these institutions were founded right after slavery during Reconstruction. So in a lot of ways, they were looked at as helping to build the Black elite class or the Black upper class. And, throughout history, they have had varying degrees of importance. A lot of people still question if HBCUs are still relevant, and they definitely are. So when it comes to community at an HBCU, family is really stressed, and the importance of giving back to your community, the importance of being, a productive citizen in your community is important. So a lot of us are taught the importance of striving to be your best, helping one another, again, family, as well as giving back to your community. There are so many organizations at HBCUs, from Greek organizations to just social organizations, that have to deal with community service. I am in a sorority, and we are a service-based organization. And, my experience at my HBCU showed me the work that my sorority was doing in the community. And from the time I was little, I knew of the work that my sorority was doing. And there are chapters of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated on all sorts of campuses and in communities all over the world. But I always remember seeing AKs on my campus doing great work. And, that really left an impact on me. My professors always stressed the importance of, coming to see them, treating them like extended members of the family. And I know that there were some professors that I can still to this day call, and I know that they'll have my best interest at heart. The next pro, I think, piggybacks on the community aspect. It's just support. There are a lot of resources on HBCU campuses for support, and I think it's just ingrained in us that we support one another. I can recall having classmates who were homeless, and you would never know it because they were still able to go to school because somebody was looking out for them, whether that be professors or resources on campus or friends that let them crash in their dorm. We had at Norfolk State University like suites, which were kind of like apartments. That was one of the dorms, and I remember a lot of my friends taking in other students just so that they could attend school for the semester because they didn't have anywhere to go. So support runs very deep in HBCUs. Like I said, you can always reach out to your professors, and there's a lot of core values that have to deal with community and just being there for one another. My third pro, and I'm just going to keep it at 3 of each, but my third pro is that going to an HBCU is considered definitely considered a resourceful option as far as tuition and housing. Sometimes HBCUs, because they are smaller schools, the tuition is a little bit cheaper than going to like larger private PWIs. But that's definitely a pro. Also, some of the programs offered can be a bit more resourceful for some people who are looking for specific programs. And sometimes, there are accelerated programs that you can do at HBCUs. I know that's the same at PWIs, but a lot of people like going to HBCUs for like a short-term period because it's just a more resourceful option, or they know that it's more cost efficient and they can go and get a degree that can compete with any other university. Because I always say it's not the name of your institution, but it's actually more so what you did while you were in school. We can both have a Harvard degree, but if I didn't apply myself and if I don't have it on my resume that I was in different organizations and that I made the best grades, then we're literally just two people with the same degree. But I can guarantee you that the person that was doing more and got the most out of their education is going to get the job at the end of the day. So a lot of people go to HBCUs because the schools and the curriculum are just as good, but they can also get a degree without having to break the bank. So I would say that the cons for HBCU, and this is just my personal experience, but HBCUs don't often reflect real world experience. And I say that because I needed that sense of belonging that I got from my HBCU and being able to connect with other Black intellectuals and thinkers that were my age, to be able to find myself in the way that I did at my HBCU. I was able to, dive deeper into African ancestry and Afro spirituality without any, eyebrows raised, without any people wanting me to assimilate to being one way or the other. I needed that sense of belonging and that sense of finding myself, but usually that doesn't exist in the real world. You do have to do some sort of assimilating in corporate America, and although most of your classmates may be Black or of African descent, during your HBCU experience, once you begin working in corporate America for major corporations, if that is your goal, you're usually gonna have co-workers and colleagues that reflect more of the PWI experience, and you have to know how to be adaptable to work with those type of people and not just minorities. And it's good to go to an HBCU because it does teach you a lot about how to be adaptable. I think that HBCUs, the experience can be kind of limiting, just because not all programs are offered at HBCUs. It really depends on what type of school you've gone to, the region that it's in. It's a lot of factors that play into the programs that are offered. But the HBCU experience can be limiting. And again, although HBCUs can be diverse, you still have to learn like diversity as a whole and how to get along with all sorts of people in the real world. And sometimes you don't get that same exact diversity that you get at an HBCU. Like my HBCU was diverse. I knew Black people from all over the world. We had Russians, we had all sorts of Europeans, all sorts of Africans, but even in the real world, it's more diverse than that. And I will say that HBCUs don't always prepare you for professionalism in the way that you need to be prepared for professionalism. Yes, we do a lot as far as activities and organizations, but I feel that professionalism for young adults should be stressed a lot more at HBCUs. A lot of people look at HBCUs as like party schools and stuff, and that's not the truth either. But I will say I do like some of the private HBCUs that do stress professionalism as far as coming to your classes and carrying yourself in a certain way. I don't think that your identity or your individuality has to be infringed on for you to be professional, but I do think that it should be stressed a little bit more what it's like in the real world for working professionals at some HBCUs. Now, for my graduate degree, I did go to the University of Southern California, which is a very prestigious school. My online program was the best online program for communications at the time. I have a Master of Communication Management. And yeah, the networking is amazing. I can literally network with Fortune 500 business owners to startup business owners. It's just amazing from all over the world, the different alumni connections that you can make utilizing the school that you went to. Another pro, I think, is that you get a lot of diverse colleagues. I did have a lot of diversity in my HBCU experience, but it was different going to USC because obviously the region changed. I had to focus on being accustomed to West Coast time and culture and things of that nature. So a lot of my colleagues and my classmates were from places like Singapore and Taiwan and China. So I had to adapt to their time zone and what they knew about communications based on the schools that they had went to previously. So it was just great being able to interact with those individuals. There was also a huge Latinx population at USC, and it was just very interesting to get the cultural exposure that I had while attending USC. I'll also say that PWIs tend to have a lot more diverse programs, programs really of the future. Like sometimes the HBCU experience can be kind of generic when it comes to the program offerings, and I find that PWIs take a deeper dive and a more well-rounded dive sometimes into programs that are offered. Some of the cons, I will say, just as a minority, you can kind of feel like you're overlooked. Sometimes you have to join like a union, like a Black union or a Latinx union, or an organization, just to make yourself feel like you get that sense of belonging that kind of comes naturally when you go to an HBCU when you're a Black person. You know what I mean? That's not to say that you always have to feel that way, and just like with any college experience, you do have to put yourself out there a little bit. To piggyback off of that, I would say that another con is just struggling with identity. I also worked at a PWI in Virginia, and they are one of the oldest colleges in the United States besides Harvard. And it was interesting to me because working there, I always felt this battle with my identity because there were slaves on the campus, and they also had a normal school for Native Americans, which are kind of schools that you send natives to assimilate to Western culture. But in a lot of ways, it was to strip them of their own identity, make them cut their hair, make them become anglicized. And so I struggled with that while I was working there and telling the stories of the alumni, because I was an alumni-focused communications manager. And I just wanted to find, identity so much, in that role. And even with my department, like, I loved it. It was honestly the best job I ever had, but I even struggled sometimes with finding my identity, connecting with others, and just having that cloud looming over me, knowing, okay, what type of woman do I need to be, knowing that it was only up until 1968, I think, that they even let Black women on this campus, or knowing that my ancestors could have been slaves here. I'm from the area that the school is located. My ancestors could have been enslaved, working at this university for no pay. So I struggled with that a lot. And while I was at USC, I kind of struggled with my identity as well, and trying to make sure that the work that I did kind of showed my identity in it. If I ever had the chance to do marketing projects on companies and stuff like that, I would choose Black companies, or I would talk about Black consumerism, because I was in the communication management program, so we did a lot of marketing work. So anything that I did, I would try to focus it back on minorities and people of color. And sometimes there's just a lack of involvement from professors. I remember I had a deadly blood clot while I was in my master's program at USC, and only one professor reached out to me to find out, like, are you alive? So definitely not that same sense of family or community that I got out at an HBCU, and you just kind of feel out of place. Sometimes diversity and inclusion, you know, sounds like that 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 umbrella term that everybody wants to use and everybody wants to unpack, but it's kind of like, do you guys ever really take a dive into this term and really actually apply it? Kind of like how this past summer everybody wanted to include Black Lives Matter in their marketing campaigns and in their PR stunts, and it's kind of like, okay, what did y'all do with all of this afterwards? It's kind of like that after effect, like, okay, we've talked about diversity and we made a few inclusion hires, but where do we go after that? And also another con is just that sometimes PWIs, especially if they're private schools, can be extremely expensive. I paid over $90,000 for my education at USC, and I wasn't there for 2 years. My program was accelerated, and I paid a whole lot of money, and let me tell you, the United States government want it back. So just be careful if you have to borrow money, because sometimes PWIs can be very expensive. So those are my pros and cons of going to an HBCU and my pros and cons of going to a PWI. Let me know in the comments what you think, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys later. I also wanted to say, do not think that because somebody has gone to an HBCU that they can't compete academically with others. I participated in 2 undergraduate research symposiums at Norfolk State. My first research symposium was on my project topic was the dehumanization of Africans in ethnological and anthropological expositions. And my second research topic that I did was from Achebe to Adichie, and that compared 20th century Nigerian writers to contemporary and 21st century Nigerian writers like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I compared her writing to writers like Chinua Achebe and some of the older Nigerian writers, and explored themes that her writings cover, including like feminism, culture, and sexuality. So don't think that HBCU students don't have a sense of academia, because we do. And I just wanted to throw that in there.